Welcome to step 2 of the Fearless Pricing Rebellion, the 3 option price menu knockout. If you've got an offer, any offer, then in the next hour we're going to build 3 versions of it. Well, yeah, 3 tiers that make higher prices feel like a bargain. So not theoretical, not hypothetical, you'll leave here with something that you can pitch tomorrow. If we haven't met yet, my name is Filip Vucic. I'm a pricing mentor out of Croatia, and I help independent experts and small agencies get paid like the problems they solve actually matter. I've done this more than 200 times across 5 continents and 34 countries, and on average, my clients raise their prices by about 40% without losing the right clients. But let me be clear, I didn't start with answers. I started with bad instincts and good intentions. So I undercharged and I explained too much and I negotiated against myself so many times. Does that sound familiar? Let's start there, because that's where most rebellions do, in discomfort and truth. So let me start with something that might sting a little. You're not underpriced because you're bad at pricing. You are underpriced because of the structure built to shrink your bargaining power. Well, the thing is, the better that you are, the less time it takes for you to do something, right? And that gets you paid less if you're doing hourly. That's what I mean. Hourly rates reward inefficiency and punish mastery. It's literally called progress punishment, performance punishment, depending on who you ask. Punishes speed, it rewards inefficiency, and it shrinks your margins the more effective you get. And the worst of all is, it teaches clients that your presence is what matters and not your thinking. So, to clarify, with commodities, more of something equals more value. Even with commoditized services like car washing, doing more hours means more work done automatically, so more value. But is this true for what you do? For me, it's not. If I give you 3 hours of pricing advice, is that necessarily worse than somebody else giving you 6? No, not automatically. It depends on who you're getting the pricing advice at, right? And would this 1-hour workshop be better if it was 6 hours longer? Definitely not. It would definitely be worse. So the more is better or more is more valuable kind of rule simply breaks down. The clock doesn't measure your value or the quality of your work. It tracks your continued obedience, being there, presence. Timesheets keep us so busy proving our attendance that we tend to forget the power of the value that we created for the client while we were there. And most pricing advice out there is performance. It's an act. It's clean numbers, logical timesheets, no emotion. But math is actually the easy part, because price is a number, but price is also an emotion. Something is expensive or not expensive. That's not a number. 100 is not expensive. 1,000 is not expensive. It depends for what, right? So the math is not what makes the pricing decisions difficult. Pricing is hard because it combines all of our fears and our taboos into one complex cocktail. It forces us to put our insecurities under a spotlight in front of serious people that we need to impress just to pay our bills. Not exactly my ideas of a good day. And the truth is, no one has incentive to teach you how to price well. Because employers, well, you can work for a company for 20 years and you will learn everything except pricing. Because employers want their margin. And competitors want you weak in this sense. And universities have no idea what they're doing when it comes to commercialization, right? So here's what the usual advice lacks. Hourly pricing isn't objective or neutral, it's just obedience training. And what I mean by that is yes, it's consistent and logical and easy to understand. But that's not enough to make it a good way of measuring quality. I mean, paintings are notoriously hard to evaluate, right? So how about we start evaluating them by counting brush strokes? I'm sure we can make an AI that can do it automatically, right? That's consistent, logical, easy to understand. More brushstrokes means a better picture. Wouldn't that be great? No, it would be absurd. If we did that, the best paid artists would overnight be people who use the smallest brush to get as much paint as possible to a canvas. It would it would give us slop. It would destroy the market overnight. But it's exactly what we do when we reduce strategic, creative advisory work to the number of hours it used to take. It's a number of brushstrokes. It's the same thing. So the thing is, it was simply never built for expertise, for experts, for paying experts. It was built for monitoring, controlling, minimizing human labor in repetitive tasks by Henry Ford or someone in that age, right? It's not meant for problem solving. It punishes speed, rewards inefficiency, and shrinks your margins the more effective you get. And the worst of all, in my mind, is that it teaches clients that your presence is what matters, not your thinking. So if you do it long enough, you yourself will start to ignore everything that makes you valuable, like actually transforming something for a client, and simply start to focus on what makes you replaceable, like showing up. I mean, of course you are replaceable. I am too. Technically, everybody is. However, I like to say that everybody is also technically edible. But we don't talk about or walk around worrying that we're going to get eaten any day now, right? You know, if you're only looking at technical stuff, we should be afraid of that as well. So don't be afraid of being easily replaced. You're replaceable, not easily replaceable. There's a big difference in this. Okay. Here's the thing. If you've been doing what you've been doing for 5, 10, 15 years, and your hourly rate only grew 30, 40% over that span, your insight, judgment, and impact probably doubled, tripled in that time. So 10 years ago, you were good. You're just not this good. So who's pocketing the difference of a triple value for 40% more? The clients, right? So the question that I'm trying to answer is not how do you get paid more for the same thing? It's not the same thing. The question is, how do you stop giving away the difference, the delta, for free? And this is, to me, why this rebellion thing matters. It's not about charging more for the same thing. It's about refusing to keep pretending that your work, our work, is a commodity and should be priced as such. Because the clock doesn't reward us, it robs us. And the more value we produce, the more it robs us. So I want to help you, if you're already used to hourly pricing, to break this bad fitting model before it breaks you. And I've seen it happen. It's not pretty. Okay, this was dramatic. Not hourly, fine. What then? Value-based, obviously, but that's still a very broad thing and still a very theoretical thing. So let me bring it closer. Value pricing is hard because it lacks an easy way to explain it. So, like I said, pricing is not just a number, it's also a story, a narrative. And it's also structure. And it's also a stance. These are all true things, right? And today, I want to show you how to do tiered pricing because it shows off much more confidence, clarity, and control than a single price does, value-based or otherwise. So this is where the idea of making a webinar about 3-option price menu comes. It's not a gimmick. It's simply a much better suited structure. and it's an antidote to the what's your hourly rate? Well, charade. Okay. I like to say that confusion kills sales. Confusing you with an amateur, confusing your value by equating it with being the least expensive or spending the most time there or simply being the least bothersome number in somebody's spreadsheet. A single line, single price can contribute to many of these destructive confusions. Three tiers, although there's more of them, in my experience, they don't confuse, they clarify. They clarify what's worth paying for. It helps the clients decide because if you only give them one price, they can basically ask themselves, should I work with you? Yes or no. But when you offer three, the question becomes, oh, there's differences in how I can solve this problem. There's differences in how I can buy this. So what are the differences? And why didn't anybody else mention it? So how should I work with you? So just that shift from should I work with you to how should I work with you is worth thousands. As a narrative example, let's say you want to hike through some unfamiliar country, okay? Some mountains. And there's a local guide who says, I'm going to charge you 40 euros to show you which way to go. And you say, okay, I'll ask around. And then another person says, look, I can give you a pretty good map for 60. I can guide you on the radio for 200, or I can guide you personally for 600. And you say, wow, why are you so much more expensive than the first guy? And this expensive person says, well, it's a minefield. You want to walk through a minefield. And the first one didn't mention that. Now, you don't know if they don't know it, or they know it, but they didn't tell you. You're not going back to the first guy. Yes, he is less expensive, but in the circumstances, it suddenly doesn't seem like a fair, like a fair comparison, right? This is what I'm talking about. A single price, face value versus a spread that then makes the client ask the right questions. So I focused this workshop in a three-tier structure and not as a gimmick. It's called choice architecture. So this is straight out of behavioral science. And here's how it works. You present three qualitatively different versions of the same offer. Not small, medium, large, based on effort. But differences, yes, in numbers, but also in risk, convenience, and ego costs. And I'm going to talk a lot about this. I'm not going to say everything because it wouldn't fit, but if you would like to know more about the basics of risk, convenience, and ego cost, ask me. I'll send you the previous presentation where I've covered it. Okay, three tiers. Anchor is the premium, high-touch, low-risk option for your client. It should feel ostentatious, and it should be highly profitable to you. Then, the core. This is the solid, ROI-rich, so easy to see how it returns the money. It's the middle ground. It's what you expect rational people, if there are such people, to choose. And it, again, should be profitable to you because your plan is to sell most of these. Okay? Not exclusively these, but most of these. And then finally, the decoy is the simple, no frills version that still works, but transfers risk back to the client. It should also be profitable and at least somewhat uncomfortable for the client. I'll show you exactly what it means. We'll go through two separate examples, maybe three, so you'll see what I mean. You already do this in your head. You already scale your work depending on the client. This just brings it into the open and makes the value visible. Quick story. A brilliant Canadian client once told me, I figured out I can do this thing, which I've done for 20 hours, in 12 now, because I've done it so many times. So I guess I should charge less. Think about that. She got better and quicker, so she thought the client deserved the discount. because her pricing was built on effort, not on expertise. And you're going to hear me say this a couple of times. They don't want your effort. They don't want your sweat. They don't care. They want the result, right? So price on that. Anyway, the 3-option menu frees you from this trap. It works because it reframes value through contrast between the layers, between the offers. It gives clients a sense of control, which is always a good thing. It anchors higher prices with little resistance. It clarifies what's actually worth paying for, and it increases perceived expertise. And people ask me, can only consultants do this? Or creatives? No. Agencies use it to structure packages by speed, scope, or support. Developers use it to offer maintenance, rollout, or clean code handoff. And coaches use it to set boundaries on access, accountability, and exclusivity. And many more. But the structure stays the same. One offer, 3 tiers, each showing a different level of commitment, of risk, and of return. So there is no way to avoid sending a message with your pricing. Whatever you price, they're going to hear something beyond just a number. And becoming aware of that message is the first step to controlling it. Okay. Enough truths, enough ranting, time to take a breath. I'm going to put something in the chat and I can view it later. You can answer it directly to chat. You can answer it to me in chats because some people are uncomfortable talking about their prices or anything like that publicly. So, yeah, we're going to circle back to this. Okay. So first example. She's a solo consultant. Let's call her Maria. So this is a real structure that I've built with someone I've anonymized enough, and she agrees. So she's a solo consultant working with NGOs on complex high-trust initiatives, and for years she charged one rate for an all-inclusive package of 4,500 euros, so about $5,000. And she is hired for a service called strategic advisory. And when your pricing lacks structure, the client assumes the lowest risk version and expects the highest support. When effort stays fixed, pricing reflects the emotional cost as well as the labor. Okay, so let's see how this would work. On the high end, on the upper end, we have the anchor, which, right, 24-hour workaround on requests, including weekends, okay? So she can present to the board if the client wants, or if the client doesn't want, she can be completely invisible. She will also assume responsibility for any failure. That's a part of the fee. Okay. So this is very high convenience for the client. It's very low risk for the client, and their ego is also protected because they can get all of the praise and get none of the blame. And that is the 7,200, which is almost double that she used the price. And she did 90% of this anyway for that money. But here, this is the anchor. This is the high one, okay? Now we have the core, which is a more trusted collaborator. Yeah, big word. Role. So it's a 72-hour turnaround, not 24, Monday to Friday. She gives strategic advice and implementation coaching and shared accountability. So she takes some of the blame if something happens. And then we have the decoy. So it's way cheaper, but it's a 5-day turnaround, asynchronous only, so only emailers and Slack. Once a month they do a Zoom. The client needs to flag problems, and she will resolve any of those within the 5 days. And she can get any attribution that she wants. So if she wants attribution on something, she gets it. That is way more convenient for her, way less convenient for the client, the bigger risk on the client, and their ego is exposed. But it's much cheaper. Now, the amount of actual work is basically the same. Technically, the service itself didn't change. The client wanted strategic advisory support, and in all three cases, that's exactly what they would get. So tiers A, B, and C can absolutely be called strategic support, right? Strategic advisory. What changed was the risk transfer, the access, and the support. And changing that delivers a different psychological experience to the client. So the price here is a completely different feeling, not just number. And whether they admit it or not, that's what clients are actually paying for. They want confidence. They want to outsource their uncertainty. They want to know someone has their back, and they'll pay for more of it if they see it structured clearly. Because what happened before is that they assumed, like I said, all of the risk goes to her, and they were surprised if she declined. They were angry at it because nobody was talking about it, right? They were surprised if she took a weekend off because nobody communicated it clearly. And of course, when they compare this to somebody who is cheaper, who says, "Oh yeah, we'll do it for, I don't know, $3,000 or something," and now the client has the ability to say, "Okay, so what's your turnaround? Or how many times do we meet? Can you present to the board?" Because now they know that these are differences, these are options. They wouldn't think to compare these things. They would just compare the price because that's the only thing that they see. So this is what I mean by contrasts, right? In the contrasts of these three tiers, the clients can now make a much better decision, much more informed decision, not just with Maria's offers, but comparing Maria's offers to somebody else's. And if they say, yes, we're doing it in three, but no, of course we're not presenting to the board, no, all of the blame is yours, blah, 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 then that's actually not a good bargain at all. But the client would fall for it if Maria just said, 4,500 and the other one says 3,000, the other one is cheaper. It's not the same service, but the client doesn't see it. Okay. So this is exactly what I mean when I say don't vary by quantity, vary by risk, convenience, or ego. You don't have to change the amount you work in order to offer packages. You have to change how you package control, access, and risk. And so I have another example for you. So this is a founder-led agency for UX UI redesign. That's mostly what they do. And Anchor is 40,000. And this is, again, white labeled. So if the client doesn't want to, they don't have to mention the agency at all. They can present it as their work if they like. So in that case, agency can't take it as credit, can't show it on their website, can't even mention that they work for this company. There's a 14-day turnaround guarantee, includes post-launch support, quality assurance, ownership, the works, right? So high convenience for the client, low risk for the client, high ego. The core is, the agency will lead the rollout. This is the normal thing. 30 to 40-day delivery, not 14. Includes quality assurance, but shared rollout accountability with the client. And the agency gets listed as a tech partner in press or launch. And it includes like a month of post-launch issue reporting, but not resolution. Resolution is extra. And finally, we have decoy, which is, we do the work. We're the vendor. Delivery within the 45 to 60 days. Client signs off on quality assurance. They own the testing, no launch support, no hand-holding, right? We do the work. This is low convenience, high risk on client, high chance of ego loss. And here's the trick. The client doesn't really downgrade. They don't see it as downgrading from like Anchor to core. They just reframe what they're ready for. Aha, okay, so if we wanted this kind of support, that's this kind of money. Fine. There's no need for the agency to slash prices if the client says, well, we can't afford the 27,000. Fine. There's decoy. It's not slashing prices, it's just lowering their expectations. It's just stripping the layers of support, certainty, and done for you convenience. And so, like, this is it's a tool for making offers in this way. So let's say that it's a 30-hour job, whatever it is, it's a 30-hour job, and it's normally done in a month. It's normally listed on the website. So the reference, the testimonial is referenced on the website of the agency, and the client pays lump sum, but any maintenance is extra. This can be design, this can be development, this can be many things. And normal price is in all three cases, the total 3,000. Okay? That's the price of a normal job for 30 hours, so that's $100 an hour. Now, let's vary it by convenience. So we say 3,000. The client says, oh, that's too much. I can't pay that. I don't have it in my budget. Okay, fine. We don't say let's then not do a part. So we don't lower the scope at all. The scope stays. However, how about we work on it when we have nothing else to do? So maybe it will be done in 2 or 6 months, or maybe 8 months. It will be done when it will be done. But in that case, 2,000 is fine. We do it on our downtime, right? So maybe you can afford that. Maybe it's not that urgent. And if, on the other hand, we can say, if we want to scale it to the other part, they say, oh, no, we need it in a week. Oh, in a week? It's still 30 hours. But if you want it done in a week and not a month, then it's 6. It's not more work. It's just way more inconvenient for us. We have to cancel stuff. We have to pull people in. So then it's 6. Okay? So that was varying by convenience. Let's do it by risk. So here, the agency takes some of the risk, but not all of the risk. And let's say that the client says, I'll take the risk of completion. Okay, then it's $100 an hour, and we'll see how much it costs. Imagine the fun we'll have finding out. And there is, if it's 40, then it's 40. If it's 45, if it's 60, well, you took the risk. Here, this is lump sum. If it takes more time, we take the risk, right? We take the fall. And of course, if they want everything in it, so like a year worth of maintenance, well, then it's 7. But whatever happens, it's not going to be more than 7. So no matter what happens, the risk is completely on the agency. Then it's more. And finally, by ego, so completely anonymously, so the client can say it's their work, that's 8. Because we get nothing from the good reference that we would usually get. Good testimonial or whatever, so we have to charge for it somehow. Or on the other side, an NGO comes and say, oh, we barely have any money. Okay, I can do it for way less. However, then I reserve the right to make this into a really detailed case study where I can basically take your problem, put it on stage, pull the pants down, and say, listen, can you see this ugly problem that was here? It was tough. It was tough. We had to, Nobody wants that for their organization. But if they really want something done on the cheap, then you have to make up for that money with this being the case study that you make more money on later. So maybe for an NGO, you do it for nothing. Because you combine it's done when it's done, and I can make a very good case study. And maybe if you do it like this and you finish it in half a year, maybe it's worth doing for nothing. And on the other hand, the same 30 hours, if somebody wants it very fast and somebody wants it anonymously, that's 11. So here's the difference by 3, here's the difference by 5. That's 11,000 for the 30. Because, why? Because it's more work? No, it's not more effort. It's less convenience and more ego cost. Okay? This is what I mean. Okay. So, when clients say, we just need a dev team, they're often lying to themselves. What they need is a way to feel safe, and they need it fast. and they want to be seen. And pricing tiers make all of these things much more visible. Sorry?
Sorry? Questo era mio tempo,
Okay. You might be thinking, doesn't this mean more work, more options? No. 3 options doesn't mean more work for you. It means showing what's already true. Not every client needs or wants or deserves or can afford your full throttle, your 100%. Most agencies are already adjusting their effort behind the scenes. This just brings this into the light and lets you control the framing. You'll notice something else here. These aren't just bigger and smaller projects. They're different risk profiles. In Anchor, you take the risk. In Core, the risk is balanced. In Decoy, the client owns the risk. That's what you're really pricing. Not just the work, but the burden of uncertainty. Right? Okay. Let's build your 3-option price menu. So you choose one offer, you price it 3 ways. Anchor High, Core Smart, Decoy Light, right? You've seen the models, you've seen the logic. It's time to build your own. And here's what we're going to do right now. So you pick one offer, existing, upcoming, and write down the outcome metric. So that means, what does your client get that actually matters to them from your service? And you write down how much do you charge right now, or how much do you think you would charge before this workshop. Okay? And now the anchor, like I said, needs to feel ostentatious with the risk profile and everything else that you can do. I had a client that sent, she was doing a twist on headhunting. And if a client would get a job with them, they would send them champagne with gold flecks in it. Okay? It cost something, but not nearly as much as the whole package. So it cost like 5% of the whole package. And the clients loved it because, like I said, it feels ostentatious. It's not about the price of the bottle. It's about the thought. Okay, so you need to price the anchor at least 1.8 your current price. So about double. You can do more. I've seen anchors with 5 times more the core that work. But at least 1.8. And then your core is not what you're charging right now. Your core is 1.3, your current price. So 30% more. Because I'm betting you're over delivering at least 30% right now. And it's our nature. We want to do a good job even if nobody asks us to. And the core, when you design it, it needs to be... So, like I said, there's very few rational people out there. But you can imagine somebody doing work with you for the 3rd time or the 4th time. They already worked with you 3 times before, and they know your offer in and out. What scope would they choose? What would they skip? What would they insist on? That kind of a thing. That's your core. And it's 30% more than you're charging right now. And finally, the decoy needs to be 90% of what you're charging right now. So 10% less, or something like this. But you reduce what's on offer to bare bones 70%, not by 70%. So by, let's say, 30. Okay? Everything that is not essential for this to actually work, you strip it off. So it's 30% less effort for 10% less price. So still profitable for you, even if somebody chooses this. So even if the worst happens, and people always think everybody will do this, and that this is not true, that everybody will choose the cheapest one, even if that happens, you are now basically charging more because you're working less, 30%, and you're charging just 10% less. So you're still better off, even if that happens. Okay. Decoy should feel adequate, but bare bones. And of course, these are starting points, okay? But they will get you moving. I'm curious at this. I'm going to share this. So I shared what's the outcome of your metric, if somebody can say. So client gets what result by what method? Your tiers need to reflect. So when you're doing the difference between the tiers, you're doing how fast, how available, that's convenience. That needs to be scaled. Then risk, who owns the outcome, who owns the bad outcome or good outcome, and who gets the credit. And here's the trick that I use with every client that I do this, right? You start by writing the anchor. You start by writing the big one. And I mean, if somebody came to you today and say, I like what you're doing, I'm going to pay you double what you're charging right now, you would give it your all, right? You might not sacrifice weekends. In fact, please don't. But you would do it as fast as you could, as well as you could. So codify this, right? So this is the one that you say, well, if somebody picks this, I'm all in. And then the core needs to feel like a smart compromise, okay? And the decoy should feel like, listen, buddy, if you're that concerned with saving a buck and willing to carry the risk, here, there you go. Okay? And you don't have to say these three things. In fact, you shouldn't say anything like that. These price tiers are more than capable of doing it on their own. So just make them and show them. They will do most of the work of communicating these three messages. So this is ostentatious. I'm treating myself on this. That's the anchor. The core is this seems like a smart compromise, and the decoy feels like, I'm definitely scraping by this. I'm definitely getting the bare bones, but I will get by because I need to. Okay, that's fine. So now, when you present these and somebody says, well, we can't really afford the core one, it's not in our budget. Okay, there's the decoy. Here it is. So you don't lower the price of anything. They can get a Volvo, they can get a Toyota, or they can get a really old clunker. But any of these will get them from point A to point B. How much they curse while driving it, well, that depends on what they can afford. And that's fine, right? Now, one more thing. Don't try to be clever when designing this. Try to be clear. Pick a service you already sell and sketch these three versions, right? Here are some more examples, just to stretch the possibilities. I'll thank you for your chat messages. I'll refer to them soon. What I meant was to say was, oh yeah, on one of my podcast episodes, I was talking to a lady that helps future immigrants get a job in the country where they want to move before they move. And I think it was 97 euros for resume check only. And 147 for resume and LinkedIn. And then for the 200 mark, she would add 3 hours of interview prep. Now, the top tier, the most expensive one, was the one that sold best because least risk, right? But it also consumed way more energy than the other two. So the question when you design your tiers, you need to ask yourself, am I structuring for client success and personal sustainability? So they all need to feel profitable to you. This is important, right? So, so your goal isn't perfection. Your goal is to stop hiding your premium version under flag of this is just my price and I'm going to give it my best. No, not everybody wants or needs your best. Give them three options, give them full control, and profit from each and every one of them. That's the idea. The idea is to offer more than one thing, but be happy whatever they choose. So you have no, if you design it like this, you will have no incentive, no pressure to, upsell them on anything. If they're here for the decoy version, power to them. You're still making more than you're making now per effort, right? Let's talk about the part that most people try to skip, which is what happens when you actually say the number out loud. So you build your 3-option menu, or you will, and then a client looks at it and leans back and says, well, this is a lot more than we expected. And instantly your stomach drops and you feel like you did something wrong. And you didn't. You did something brave. There's a difference. Let me help you with 3 main negotiating tips, okay? When they try to talk about inputs or outputs, it's just a couple of hours for you. You probably heard that one. Or, it's just a 3-page report. I mean, I can make it 30. I have ChatGPT. How many do you want, right? It's not going to say anything more. But so, when they talk about inputs or outputs, circle back on the value, focus back on the value. When they try to frame the whole conversation like they're doing you a favor, if they're considering you for a job, they're not. Okay? If they didn't need somebody like you, they wouldn't be wasting your time, their time, with this conversation. So if they ask you for something more, so you offer this and they ask for something more, sure, if they give something more. It doesn't have to be money. Could you do this but on our software, not yours? Sure, but then I would like to, go skiing first and then come back in 2 weeks and then we'll begin. That's something. That's an inconvenience for them. So it's an inconvenience for you, it's an inconvenience for them. Nothing for nothing. It's important. Because if you give them something for nothing, they'll ask for more. And you've been there. And finally, don't let them bind you with yes or no answers. So there's yes if, and there's no unless. So the yes if is the nothing for nothing, right? And the no unless, there was an interesting case. I was helping with a negotiation, and a client was really hoping to get like 200,000 for something. And the client says, oh no, because of the way that we are funded, blah, 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 we can only do 50, not 200. And my client was crestfallen that they could not begin to cover their expenses with this. But I was there. So I said, well, that wouldn't work for us at all unless you found like 10 more clients which would buy at this price. So you find them. And they said, oh yeah, that's not a problem because we're a big system and there are other systems that have to work with us. So if we have this system, everybody else has to do it too. They ended up finding 9. It was fine. My client didn't get 200,000 from one client. They got 450 from 9 different clients. Well, 10, technically. That's the not unless, no unless, right? And if everything else fails, if they ask you for something, can I buy this Toyota for the money that would usually be used to buy a used, very much used car? And you can say, well, how do I do that? This is Chris Voss. This is never split the difference. But it works. Absolutely. So how can I do that? You make it their problem to think of how can this madness become. And if maybe they find a good way and maybe you part ways. Both is fine. Right? Price isn't the main barrier to sales. This is important. Uncertainty is the main barrier to sales. Most clients don't object to the number, they object to the value that they don't yet see compared to this number, or the risk that they don't understand. And I've lost jobs, projects, because I've underpriced. Because I had very little experience doing international sales, and I wanted to sell a Singaporean at European prices. And their reaction was, I can't even show this to my boss because that would be like inviting him to eat this 20 cents burger, right? Oh God, what have I done? So I've literally lost clients over this. So like I said at the beginning, nobody's born with this stuff. I did all of the mistakes. That's why I can talk about that. Okay, just a few token objections and the answers to them. So a client says this seems like a lot. Okay, and you know your stuff. You say, well, yes, because it removes this risk. So let's say churn risk entirely. And the return on investment is usually about 3 months. You're not guaranteeing anything. You don't control enough to guarantee anything. But this is usual. And you can say that. The client says another provider quoted half of that. Say, okay, that's exactly why we include a risk cap and implementation support. Their price won't matter if their solution doesn't work, right? I usually say there are cheap accountants and expensive accountants, and cheap accountants are much more expensive because you need to pay them the fine and the expensive accountant to get you out. Also, personal experience. And just one more. Client says, so what if we try the cheaper one first? So somebody else offers something cheaper. Why if we try that? You can say, okay, that's an option. But every month of delay costs you real money. The money that you're not getting or more money that you're losing. And this offer is built to deliver now, to hit the ground running. The decision is yours. Okay? So I'm curious, because we're about the time that I would really like to cap this off with some questions. What are the scariest objections that you heard after quoting a price? And maybe I can help with this. That could be a fun discussion. Okay?
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Linda.
I actually it just happened to me this week where somebody asked, because the second payment was due, and she asked if I don't get certain things, can I have a reduction in the final price? And I said no, because I only offered that I might give you something for free. I never said that if I don't give you that free thing, I'm going to charge you less, right? But the real issue was, and I didn't think about it until afterwards, was that she was doing her resume and for her and a cover letter, and she suddenly got an offer to send her resume to a recruiter for Apple for a great job.
Okay.
Can we do that? So I said yes, but what that did was it changed my whole week. I had to move other people around, which I didn't lose any money for doing it, but I might have lost like some personal time. And
that doesn't matter. So that's none of her business if you
I
lost any
didn't,
money or
I
not.
didn't go into that, but what I felt, I was a little annoyed because I'm like, I didn't charge you any extra for going out of order, and now that's going to take us both more time.
This is the nothing for nothing thing, right? So can we do that? Yes. If. Right? If. So
Yes.
can we do that? Sure. So let's start off light. We can do that if, as soon as we're done, you give me a glowing recommendation on LinkedIn. That's starting off light. So that's not any more money. Okay?
Right.
That's something. So what does this do? This helps you get some more money down the road, right? So maybe this is a vulnerable person, you don't want to squeeze them for more money. Okay, that's fine. Or you say, sure, but look, I'm having a sales call next week. I would like you to show up and talk to my future client for 2 minutes. Just tell them what kind of a job I did for you. Right? That's also an inconvenience for them, but you would get something out of it. Right? So nothing for nothing. That's important because otherwise, I mean, she would recommend you, but she would also tell the whole story, and the next client will then be offended if you say no to them, even if you are losing money. Right? So this is not good for anybody. Anyway, yes if, or no unless, if you like. Okay, have I answered your question?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? So what's the scary objection? Yeah, please, Colin. Hi.
That's putting my mic on. Can you
Yep.
hear me okay?
We can.
Great. I deal with professional service firms who charge by the hour, and their scariest concern about a quoted price is we're doing fine as it is. Why would we start quoting fixed prices? There's a number of reasons, one being use of AI and becoming more efficient. So the number of hours goes down. Oh my God, we're not going to be able to, our profits might be cut in half. What can we do? And when we talk about fixed price, it's something that is, well, the onus is then on us. As you say, the risk is transferred to us
Yes.
as the services firm. And we're making pretty good money now, but we could, there's a risk it's going to go down. So that's the concern of many of my clients.
So the risk thing is the key here. People think the goal of business is to reduce all of the risks. And if you do that as an agency, congratulations, you're employed. And being employed is nothing bad, but when you're employed, your employer usually gets at least 6 out of 7 of every dollar that you make. Most of the value goes to the one who takes the risk. So the goal in my head is not to eliminate the risk. The goal is to take on some of the risk, not all of it, but some of the risk that you can take, and you are going to handle it much better than the client, right? So why would they change a good thing? Firstly, because it's not. Because like I said, it's performance penalty. If they do a good job and they're done in less time, they're going to get less money. And as one of my colleagues says, people who charge by the hour should never update their computer system because the more it lags, the longer it all takes, right? I think that if what you're doing is expertise based, then their value grows and their hourly can't grow that much. Because when somebody says, what's your hourly? If you say 3 times more than they expect, they will say, are you nuts? But, so this is an old example. I was friends years ago with the first person in Croatia that did a website based on templates, right? And he could do in 2 hours what it used to take developers to 3 weeks to build. And when he tried giving this to the client in like a day, the client refused to pay the full price. Because, obviously you didn't do a good job. You rushed it. He didn't. He was just better at it. So what he had to do, and it was funny, is build it in a day, wait for 2 weeks, not 3, and then after 2.5 weeks say, good news, I'm done early. And the client said, wow, you did it early. Here's like a bonus. That happened. He got a bonus for me. Sometimes it's about perception of work, right? But should he get less money because he's more efficient? No, of course not. That's ridiculous, right? So firstly, AI is going to change a lot, of course. And I think it's going to highlight the difference between quality work and fast work, because it's not very much not the same thing. But I dislike the hourly model because it has a fundamental crack in it. It fundamentally, the more hours you log in, the more money you get, but this is against the interests of your client. So you either favor the client and not, your family, or you favor your family but not your client. There's a conflict, an inherent conflict of interest. And yes, there's rules and there's regulations and there's ethics, but these are all papering over the cracks. The crack is very deep. And with value-based, it's not like that. The more value I make, the more I can charge, and the more value the client gets. And that is let's say our interests then align, and this is why I like it. And just one more thing, the fixed price thing, right? The risk. The problem is they don't charge enough for the fixed thing. So in my service, I have a fixed price, but I'm only done when the client can actually charge. So when they successfully charge something in the real market to somebody that I don't know. If a client pays it, good, now we're done. Now, sometimes it takes me 2 months, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. My price doesn't change. In my philosophy, the client doesn't get more value because I worked more. Okay? So I take the risk, yes, but I charge enough that even if it takes 6 months, I'm still okay. I'm not thrilled by it. But then when I say, listen, we need to do this one more time, this particular part, the client knows I'm not trying to make a quick buck. They don't even suspect it because I wouldn't do that unless it was needed. Right? Our incentives align. I want to be done as soon as possible, and so do they. Okay? Does that make sense?
It does. I have a follow-up question,
Yeah, please.
if I might. So one thing that my clients have difficulty with is as we talk about value-based billing, this hourly billing, they have a real problem in defining value. What is the value of this service that I provided to a client? For example, say it's a law firm, they're providing legal advice. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. I've read and seen so many things about value-based pricing. It's in vogue a little bit. And I'm going to give you a litmus test of do those people who talk about it know anything about it or not? Or have they done it actually? So if somebody says you can determine the price based on value that you calculate and then you bring it to a client, they have no idea what they're talking about. The client doesn't care what you think the value is. No matter how right you are, it doesn't matter. Even if you can mathematically prove everything, you have a conflict of interest to present it like that. They're not as good as you are in your area. They're not going to be able to read it. They're not going to be able to trust it. So the only way to actually do value-based pricing is to meet the client in person or on Zoom and talk to them and ask the questions and get the numerical values out and then help them come to a conclusion of the value of the project. And then you extract a percentage of it. So that's the only way to actually...
Admittedly, but the client has difficulty defining the value. That's really where the key is. They have no conception of the value of this legal advice compared to
you get through it through current costs. So you get through it through additional revenue, if there is some, or lost revenue if they're losing it right now for a legal problem, okay? So they can't rent something out because the legal situation is problematic. That's a very clear revenue loss, right? And this has already been going on for a year. If it drags through the courts for another year, that's a very clear loss. And this is just one of the things. So one is lost revenue or additional revenue. One is cost, so direct cost. If this goes on, if you lose this, you're going to get an additional this and that. If we make a quick work of this, you will stand not to lose this huge pile of money that you would otherwise lose. Then reduce risks, and this is not the same as cost. Cost is something that is certain. They're paying this much or not getting this much each month. That's one thing. But the additional risk of additional lawsuits or a breach of this or that or the other or some fine that they could face, right? These all pile on top of each other. And finally, sometimes there's, if this goes on, your people might start to leave. What if this very bothersome situation scares off your chief of R&D or whatever? How much will it cost to replace them, right?
Mhm.
They don't have to know, it doesn't fall from the sky. You have to help them construct it. And then,
Yeah.
as a rule, if you ask 5 to 10%, I'm not talking about, so for normal things, not things in the millions, 5 to 10% is usually okay. That's
Sorry,
very,
I'm
very.
following the 5 to 10%. Sorry, what is that referring
So
to?
if we calculate that the value of the project like this, piling on numbers, is 100,000, then
Yes.
asking for 10 to solve it is usually fine.
10% of
Yeah,
the value that you're going to provide.
something along. So you need to know your costs, something like this,
Yes.
but usually you can get much higher evaluation. So if I was just, calculating how much I would pay for hours, this and that, I would get to like 2.5, 3. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And so if you think this will cost you 2.5, 3, and you fix a price at 10, you would have to be very wrong to lose money on this. And
Mhm.
sometimes, frankly, sometimes you do. However, I have like 32 to 40 projects a year. I sometimes, let's say, lose out on maybe 2. That's acceptable because I make so much money on the others. It's fine. It's the risk that I took from the client because
Yes.
you get paid for your work, yes, but if you take the risk, you get paid for the risk as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the part that people usually don't get. They say, if we only charge for the work and we charge it fixed, what then? Because we take all the risk. Charge for the risk. That's how it goes.
So would one way to present that be, and I'm looking at your 3 options.
Uh-huh.
So option 1 is, okay, we do it by the hour. Here's my estimate of what it normally takes. That's your kind of baseline. And then if, say, we'll use that example, we provide 100,000 of value in the next year, and we would bill 10% of that value. And if it's only 50, we'd bill 10% of that value provided. So it could in fact be a percentage as opposed to a fixed number. What do you think of that approach?
Absolutely. If that works for you, if the math works for you, and if you say, okay, so this is being fairly compensated for the risk, absolutely. Why not? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry,
I,
Linda had a question as
I'm
well.
sorry, I'm
No, no, no,
monopolizing.
no. I'm happy.
Go ahead.
That's what I'm here for.
Well, I am gonna have to go in a minute, so maybe the answer to this would make a good post for you.
Please.
So we all have our own little zones of genius, right? Sometimes you can do one thing for a client that you're like, that was worth everything they paid me. But I've contracted to do all of this stuff, so I'm gonna keep going. And that's why when they ask for some money back, it's like, are you effing kidding me? Like, how dare you? Now, I use it, my zone of genius. I talk about how I'm going to teach you what I'm doing as I'm doing it. You're never going to need another resume writer again. There's not another resume writer out there that doesn't want you to come back to them the next time you need a resume. I don't want you coming back to me.
I'm the same.
But if I do that one thing and then they ask me for a discount, I'm like, I don't know what to say, but it never helps me get another client from them to refer me.
Absolutely. And this is why the scope creep is actually 6 different animals in a trench coat. And a few of those is actually our own fault. And one of them is gold plating. So they asked you for 10, you give them 40 without them asking you. And then you're offended when they don't appreciate it. But nobody asked you to do this, right? They order cows, you delivered cows in tuxedos. Yes, it's more elegant and you feel like you did. So this is why I think it would be a perfect fit for you to design this, you'll never need it again, into your high offer, into your anchor. You do that, somebody pays you for that, you'll be happy. But if they don't want this and they don't want to pay for this, then you don't do it. And it was all their own choice to do something that they will have to get back to you, right? and they'll respect you for giving them that choice. And I know how bad it feels to leash yourself back, to hold yourself back, right? And yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Yes, it is just hard to hold back because it's what gives me my career satisfaction to I mean, I don't know. Anyway, you're terrific. I have a client meeting in 15 minutes.
I went 10 minutes over time, but the questions were cool. So thank you for the questions. Thank you for
Cool.
sticking with me on screen. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
So
say
is it
this.
just 2 parts or there's going to be a 3-part?
Oh, there's going to be more parts. I do every part twice. So once for the Australian time zones and once for the American time zones, and the Europeans can catch both. So there's 2 chances for everything, and I record. So even if you can't come, you can get a
Was
recording.
the one that I was on before, was that because that was months back. I might have missed the first one of this series.
If you tell me which in your like on LinkedIn when you can, tell me what you've seen. I'll send you if you missed something out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. I really like this presentation. I like the colors and
Thank you.
terrific. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks very
everybody.
much.
I can see you out there. That's fine. Not everybody can be on camera. Colin,
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
not a problem. I wanted to give you a 30-second fable before you go to your clients. Okay?
Sure.
I made it. So once upon a time, there was a lazy giant. He was a lumberjack. And since he was a giant, he only had to lean on a tree and the tree fell. And his colleagues had to work all morning with axes. But they were all paid by the hour, so the giant died poor. The end. Tell that to your
Good
client.
one. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, everybody, for coming and for your questions. And I'll see you on the next step of the Fearless Pricing Rebellion. Here we
And
go.
now we know you can sell cows, the tuxedos
With
for cows.
tuxedos. Please don't.
They gotta be,
Good
they gotta
analogy.
be easily washable.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you, people.